I'm Peter Charles and welcome to my video on tying the Black Nose Dace Weamer. My buddy Dave loves to catch fish on Black Nose Dace patterns. He catches them on clouser patterns, streamer patterns, goodness knows what else. And you get steelhead, smallmouth bass, and other species. And after a while you get a little tired of watching him pull in fish after fish after fish. So I had to go out and tie my own. In this case I've adapted the Black Nose Dace color scheme to my Weamer style of fly tying. This fly is quite simple. We have a little bit of bucktail for the wing, white underneath, black in the middle, and this olive dace color on top. The hackle is white marabou. The body is white yarn with some pearlescent mylar. We have a silver tag, and for some flash we have some pearlescent flashabou. We don't have too much flash on this fly because I don't want it looking like a neon sign when it goes through the water. So on this particular fly we're looking at keeping the flash down to a minimum, using the movement of the marabou and movement of the tail to give us what we need. You'll notice the head is quite large, and that's there for a reason. It's not an accident. I want a big bulky head which causes the water to flow around, to bulge out, and that causes the material to fluff up and have more movement. Also notice the fact that because we're using a clear monofilament thread, that the eyes and the colors show through underneath. So it actually looks a bit like a Black Nose Dace head. Okay, let's get on to tying it. When I tie my minnow patterns, I tend to tie them on metal tubes rather than plastic. I don't care for plastic that much because it tends to plane up in the water unless you put a bead head or a cone head on the front. And also then you need a hefty sink tip to pull it down, where metal tends to get down on its own. I'll tie this on either copper, aluminum, or brass. I prefer to use aluminum for most of my minnow patterns, but I will use brass or copper where I need a pattern to get down in heavy currents. So let's start. I'm using Danville monofilament fine. It's also available in ultra fine. And I've used this thread because it's clear, because I can see through it, because when we put material underneath it we'll be able to see that material. So we'll start by wrapping on at the front. Next we'll tie on our mylar. It's gold on one side and silver on the other. This is uni size 12. Because I want the silver to show, I'll start by tying gold side up. And then as I wrap this on, it will flip over to silver. Now when I get down to the end, I make much wider turns. I'll show you why in a moment. Now I'll go back to my closely spaced turns. Plenty of half hitches. Make sure they're snug. Okay, now here's the reason for those wide spaced turns. As I wrap this mylar, I hold it tight and it digs in and it forms ridges. And those ridges will grip my junction tubing. So when I slip my junction tubing on, it will stay on. Seems to have a bit of a bent tube here, so I'll fix that in a second. This tube is recycled from a damaged fly and it looks like a fish has bent it a bit. I try to recycle as much as possible. So if I have a fly that gets damaged while fishing, I'll strip the material off and reuse it. Our next step is the pearlescent mylar, size 12, also uni mylar. And now onto our yarn for the body. This is uni yarn, regular, size 2X white. Both of them here, and I will wrap all the way to the back. stopping about where I want my tag to be, which is right there. And closely spaced turns all the way back. Nice snug. For this next step, the bobbin I'm using does not have a lot of grip, so it allows the yarn to go on rather loosely. If I pulled it on tight, it would stretch and I'd have to put on a lot more turns. So just touching turns with a light pressure. You could do this with your fingers too if you wanted. Some people prefer to cut their yarn off rather than leave it on the spool. Either way, you don't want a lot of pressure, otherwise this yarn stretches out. You don't want to see the silver showing underneath. I may ask why I bothered with all that silver, but yarn tends to get a little translucent when wet, so something shiny underneath will give it a little bit of brightness. So the body will look a little bit more alive when wet. Lock into place. Now that may look a little messy right now, but it'll be covered by the marabou, so we won't have to worry about it. Pitches again. See what I mean about pulling them tight? Those just slipped up right off. That's very annoying when you're using a rotary vise and your half hitches slip off the tube. Now we'll wind on our pearl mylar. We'll do it in the opposite direction, roughly 1/8 of an inch apart. Again, fold up and back and wrap over. That locking in place that I do by wrapping forward, folding over, wrapping back, it's not a pretty method. It bulks things up a little bit. It can end up with a bit of ugliness, but the thing is it doesn't come apart. The material doesn't come flying out after you've had one fish and you see your rib trailing behind your fly. So it's something I do regularly, and so I don't worry about being pretty, I worry about it being durable. Our next step is the marabou feather. And we try to avoid having too thick a feather. I don't want this too bulky. So I tie it on by the tip, stroke the feathers back, stroke those barbs back. Again, fold the tip over, lock it in place, and then just cut the tip off. Some materials you can break the tip off, and marabou I don't recommend it. It has a tendency to break. Quills are quite fragile. Now keep your bodkin handy here, because if you get any barbs that get trapped, just use your bodkin to pick them out. Now marabou quills are quite delicate, so be careful when you are wrapping them on that you don't apply too much pressure and break the quill. Been there, done that numerous times. It's very annoying. Fold your barbs back. Again, fold the quill back, wrap over. We have a few strays here, so we just pull those back into place. And then we just smooth everything over and tidy it up. Next step is to put in our pearlescent flashabou. We just need a couple of strands here. Like I said before, I don't want this thing looking like a neon sign. Marabou always seems to get picked up all the time, so you get any strays, just pick them out. There we go. Let's finish that up. And I'm going to trim off this flashabou. Here's the point I'm working on as my point on the vise I'm using for reference, and just trim bits off. Try to make it a ragged end, don't square them off. Okay, the last step is the bucktail. And when you're using bucktail, there's always a lot of short hairs down here at the bottom. So I'm going to grab the tip of the bucktail and stroke out all these short hairs in the garbage can. There we go, quite a bit less. Now we'll put that in our hair stacker. Tie this on, again lining it up with that point on the vise. Here's a pinch loop, and then line it up. This is where a rotary vise comes in handy. You can turn it on side to see that it is lined up correctly. Trim the front off at an angle. Be careful not to cut the thread. And clean this up at the end. Work our thread back to the back of the head. And we tie in our black. Again, using a sparse clump as before. Clean off the short hairs. Put in our deer hair stacker. Line it up on the same spot on the vise, making sure you're on top. Pinch loop. Check for alignment. And trim off at an angle. I'll just finish that off. Again, this thread is slippery. It often wants to skid off the end of the head, and that's normal. It's part of the joy of using it. The benefits outweigh these little hassles. Okay, working to the back again. Okay, the last step is our olive bucktail. Again, use a sparse clump. Strip out the short stuff. Put in our hair stacker. And align it up with the same spot on the vise. And make sure it sits right on top of the other colors. Ideally, you want to see a little bit of black showing through. There's a little bit of black there and a little bit of black there. Perfect. And we'll just wrap that forward. Always checking our alignment. And the last step is to cut off at an angle. Being careful not to cut the thread. Now we clean up the head. Now we move on to doing our eyes. We have mylar eyes here. And we use our bodkin to pick out an eye. Sounds great, doesn't it? Use your bodkin to pick out an eye. Rather ghoulish. It's a good way to handle stick-on eyes. Hold them in place. Do the other side. Just put the eye on the tip of the bodkin. Position. Squeeze in place. So now we use our material to wrap over our eyes and hold them in place. Once we've done that, just clean up a little bit. And we'll finish. So when we start with our head cement, what we want to do is brush it onto the wraps of the head, working it into the wraps. So I'm running my brush strokes with the wraps. As I say, that slippery danville can be a pain to use, but you get this very, very nice realistic appearance when you're done. As you can see right through the head and see the materials that are underneath it. It looks quite lifelike, so it's worth it. Anyway, give this fly a whirl. It's not difficult to tie, and it's very, very, very effective. So you'll catch a lot of different species with it. Won't be afraid to use it for largemouth bass, pike, walleye, different, rainbow trout, brown trout, brook trout. Give it a whirl for them all. If it eats a minnow, it'll eat one of these. Anyway, there you go. Enjoy.